Good evening. Okay, welcome everybody. So today we're starting off, we have an intense day of presentations. This session is dealing with issues of the Muslim Brotherhood in the West. The first speaker will be Professor Dina Lisnyansky. She'll be speaking about academia and the Muslim Brotherhood. I'll be the second speaker. I'll be looking at the Muslim Brotherhood and its ideology on issues of academic higher education. And then Haras will be speaking about the agenda and ideology of the Brotherhood and how they're recruiting people in the West. Okay, so the first speaker is Dina. I'm just going to pull up her biography very quickly. So Dina is a public commentator and expert on issues of political Islam. She's a professor at the Department of Middle East Studies at Tel Aviv University, and her areas of expertise is on radicalism and extremism, and as well as terrorism and national security. She holds a PhD from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and she has vast experience working on these issues internationally. She's also in the process of completing a very important book on the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe. So Dina, the floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see you all. And Daphne or Ira, may I share my presentation?
You should be able
to. Cool. Okay, so we'll start. So today we will be speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood's influence on European and North American universities. And as Charles presented, I will be speaking mostly about the content that is used in these universities by various sides, especially professors, but not only professors. Of course, during this session, you will see how the content is being conveyed in a very special way. There is a modus operandi behind it. So I will be speaking only about the content. This means that I will leave the floor for, of course, for Charles and Haras to speak after me about the ways that this content is being spread. First of all, I would like to address the problem itself.
Dina, if you don't mind, can you just full screen the PowerPoint?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna just do this. All right. Can you see it clearly now?
Perfect.
Great. So we will speak a little bit about modern European anti-Semitism that has a lot to do with the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is spreading a lot of its ideas among scholars in European universities and in American universities. We can see a very vast spread of ideas, and we should see that some of the reports about new modern European anti-Semitism, they focus on various countries. And in these countries, they speak about all kinds of anti-Semitism slurs and hatred, behavior that includes a lot of hatred against Jews. We see that this special report that I'm showing you right now in this presentation, here it focuses on 12 countries that are home to around 96% of European Jewry. We're talking about Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Hungary, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Spain, Sweden, and the UK. Around 90% of the respondents to European Union's Agency for Fundamental Rights questions in 2018, they said that they feel anti-Semitism is growing in their country. And a similar number say they experience it online, while a staggering 73% say it is evident in public spaces. Today, we will speak about these public spaces when we will focus mostly on, of course, campuses, academic campuses. Since the last survey, the number of anti-Semitic attacks has grown rapidly in some countries up to 20% in 2019. And after the beginning of COVID-19, the numbers of attacks have increased, especially online attacks, and especially around, again, the student bodies, the campuses, and the academia in whole. This was a first, let's say, preliminary slide that I was presenting. But now we will speak about the second part, which would be the presenting of Muslim Brotherhood ideology. So, because I don't want to focus too much on the Muslim Brotherhood itself right now, but mostly on the way they conduct their messages, I would like to just give you a small intro to Muslim Brotherhood ideology, and you can ask me all of your questions later on, or ask me for further readings, which would be maybe helpful to you to understand about a little more about Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, when we speak about political Islam, we mostly refer to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. Political Islam is, in fact, another term for Muslim Brotherhood ideology, sometimes spread by other organizations, not just Muslim Brotherhood, but mostly by Muslim Brotherhood affiliated organizations. So the MB, Muslim Brotherhood ideology, is mostly based on religious Islamic principles, but it is also based on two important basic foundations, which we need to remember in order to understand the new messages that we will soon take a look at. So first basic foundation is the Muslim Brotherhood was founded as a social, religious, and the political movement as a reaction to the Western influence in the Middle East and the Arab world. It happened in the beginning of the 20th century in 1928, and it was founded by Hassan al-Banna, who was a very important Muslim scholar, and this was the first basic foundation. So Muslim Brotherhood is in fact an organization that was founded as a reaction to the Western influence in the Middle East. Second foundation or basic foundation would be that the Muslim Brotherhood regards the state of Israel as an extension of this foreign Western influence, which is regarded as a very bad influence to the Middle East by the Muslim Brotherhood. As a result of this notion, Jews are demonized by this ideology as people, not just as Israeli citizens. Here we are talking about anti-Semitism versus anti-Zionism. I'm sure you've already spoke about this on previous days, but now I would like to emphasize this fact because this is a very important notion that we will see that has a lot to do with anti-Semitic smearing on campuses. In 1948, Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, incited the masses against Egyptian Jews in Cairo, and this was against King Farouk's policy. King Farouk was the Egyptian king at that time. After that, in 1949, Hassan al-Banna was assassinated. Nobody really knows who assassinated him, but one of the rumors said this was a Jewish plot against Hassan al-Banna as a retaliation after this massacres of the Egyptian Jews in Cairo. So these are the two most important notions we need to know about the Muslim Brotherhood. First, that it was founded as a social and political movement, a religious political movement, as a reaction to the Western influence. And second, that it regards the state of Israel as a direct extension of this Western influence. These important notions are staying with us. They will remain with us. So now we will have to go back into our own reality. We can see that in 2021, a new survey was conveyed already in March or April. And the survey was on Jewish Americans' experiences with anti-Semitism. 40% of Jewish Americans heard anti-Semitic comments, slurs, or threats directed at someone else over the last 12 months. We're talking about the period of the last year. So 40%, but it's not enough, of course. Here, I'm going to reduce my slide, I'm sorry, because I needed to see the whole slide. Later on, I will increase it again. Over the past 5 years, the ADL asked Jewish Americans, over the past 5 years, have you experienced or observed any of the following in-person experiences? So 63% of the people who were surveyed, of the Jewish Americans that were polled in this poll, they said that they experienced or witnessed some form of anti-Semitic incident, 63%. 56% said they heard anti-Semitic comments, slurs, or threats targeting others, not themselves, others. 25% admitted that they were targeted by anti-Semitic comments, slurs, or threats themselves. And 9% said that they were physically attacked because they were Jewish. So this is an ADL survey. We have some more surveys here. I'd like to show you a 2021 survey also by the ADL, where we see that more than half, almost 60%, 59% of Jewish Americans polled said they feel Jews are less safe in the US today than they were a decade ago. And we were talking about European Jews before that. Prior to that, we were talking about European Jews. And the fact is that American Jews are feeling mostly the same. Slightly fewer respondents reported being afraid of a violent attack at a synagogue, only 49% in 2021 versus 55% in 2020, of course, because of the attacks on Jewish synagogues in 2020. There was also a very slight drop within the margin of statistical error, they say, from 2020 to 2021 in reported concern about various threats to the Jewish community, including verbal harassment, physical attacks, and the defacement of synagogues or other Jewish institutions. Here we're speaking about somewhat physical symptoms of this anti-Semitic sentiment that we're speaking about. But what would happen on campuses? Prior to that, I just want to say that in 2017, there was no state within the US that hasn't experienced or that hasn't been reported on an anti-Semitic incident in the US. Every state had at least one incident, one anti-Semitic incident. And it was for the first time since at least 2010. So something has happened during those 7 years. And since 2017, we only hear about an increasement of these incidents in the US. And now we're going to talk about the colleges and the university campuses that are becoming less and less safe for Jews. And someone would ask me, why am I saying that the campuses are less safe for Jews in 2021 or in 2017 than they were in 8 or 9 or 12? The thing is that you can see on this graph that college and university campuses had 204 incidents in 2017, up from 108 in 2016. This is a huge increase. We're talking about a very big number. And when we speak about incidents, we speak about assaults, we speak about vandalism, which is occurring every day, when we speak, of course, about harassment. So why is it happening? In fact, I understand that even if you attend, and you, of course, are attending every panel during this amazing ISGAP Summer Institute, you wouldn't be able to hear everything because we still are not able to bring you the whole amount of information because there's too much information, there's too much. We should speak about certain things that are most important within the framework of this seminar, of course, and this is exactly what I'm going to try and do. I would like to say that the disturbing content that we see on the campuses, sometimes said and slurred by the professors themselves, this is the thing that makes the campuses more unsafe than they used to be. And why is it happening? We can see that this is a very nice citation by Elliot Eisner, a longtime professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. He once said that any learning environment has 3 types of curriculum. First, the explicit curriculum, or what the institution says it teaches. Second, the implicit curriculum, or the learnings that students take away from the institution without their having to be taught. And the third would be the null curriculum, or those things that the institution does not teach. We could call it a subtext, something that we understand the moment we step our foot on the campus. I mean, the moment you become a student, you get into the campus and then you start breathing the air inside the campus, right? Right now, you guys are in Oxford. You're breathing Oxford air. You should know that there is a certain environment there there's a certain environment that is sometimes very positive and sometimes very negative. It depends. It depends towards whom also. So when a topic ends up relegated to the null curriculum that is not taught, we must wonder whether it is because the institution does not consider that topic to be important. So it is with anti-Semitism. And also we need to think about another fact. There is nothing null about null curriculum because there is no vacuum. Instead of learning about anti-Semitism, something else is being learned and taught. But what? So today we're going to speak a bit about some of the sayings of professors that are ideologically connected to the Muslim Brotherhood and are teaching on US and UK campuses. And I won't be able to bring you everything because I really would like my colleagues to speak and to leave enough time. But I would like to emphasize and to put a spotlight on some of the sayings of those professors who have ideological connections to the Muslim Brotherhood.
So Dina,
Yes.
you're sorry to interrupt. You have 5 minutes. Sorry.
5 minutes, good, because I'm going to use all of them. So, all right. So what you need to know is that I purposely didn't put here their names because we are dealing right now with a bit of a confidentiality issue. So this is why I'm not going to give you the names of the people that I'm citing here. But just a few moments here, just a few citations. When Hezbollah launched the 2006 war with Israel, a very known professor from Yale signed a letter that praised Hezbollah's attack on Israel as a heroic operation to safeguard the dignity of the Lebanese and Arab people. And then he bitterly denounced the many Arab governments that opposed Hezbollah. Hezbollah, you should know, is an Iranian proxy whose goal is to establish an Islamist state across the Arab world, eliminate Israel, and fight Western imperialism. This is why I'm regarding to Hezbollah as an Iran-affiliated militia, by the way. And it has everything to do with MB ideology, even though we're speaking about different ideological streams here, because Muslim Brotherhood are Sunnis and Hezbollah are Shiites. But the ideology is the same when it has to do with Western influence and the reaction to it, and to Israel within this Western influence. So now we can see that Hezbollah's leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, he said, if the Jews all gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of going after them worldwide. So here we can see that this professor is in fact supporting a very anti-Semitic, not to say racist even, organization. The same professor has welcomed Hamas' 2006 electoral victory, saying to an interviewer that Hamas might be able to produce the beginning of salvation. I wonder what else would the Arabs have without Hamas? And Hezbollah has said, nothing except humiliation. I congratulate Hamas on its victory. Hamas, of course, is another Iranian-supported terrorist group, not just Iranian-supported, but also Qatar and Turkey-supported. Its founding charter calls for the murder of Jews, the obliteration of Israel, and its replacement with an Islamist theocracy, and liberally borrows from an anti-Semitic forgery, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and I don't have to tell you that it's a complete fraud. Another Yale-based professor was glorifying jihad. He called an Arab poet by the name of Abdur Rahim Mahmoud as a symbol of heroism and pride. Though Mahmoud's poems glorify jihad and martyrs, and have inspired terrorists and their sympathizers. And this professor wrote to his students, even if the best 100 Arab poets loaded themselves with dynamite and exploded in the streets of Arab capitals, it would not be enough. For real change to come about, thousands of people will have to die. Thousands must martyr themselves. This particular person was a Yale-based professor. A CMC-based professor has said that recent Israeli aggression is the latest in a long series extending back to the founding of the Zionist state and motivated by both historical ambition and by a racist supremacist ideology that denigrates the indigenous population. He also described the IDF as a Zionist killing machine. By the way, in 2007, he signed a petition that called Joseph Biden's resolutions to divide President Biden's resolution. Then he was just senator, but then he gave a resolution to divide Iraq into 3 autonomous zones, and this professor called it a Zionist plot. So what we're dealing with here is, in fact, just a few examples of not just a Zionist hatred or just a political criticism, which is absolutely legitimate, by the way, if there is a political criticism against Israel. We are dealing here with something else. We're dealing here with anti-Zionist ideology that is being spread on campuses, and it becomes an anti-Semitic ideology. And Charles, I know I have to stop, so I'm stopping right now. Incitement is growing because of these ideologies. Jewish students are being personally targeted and subjected to hatred online for expressing their personal support for Israel, says Matthew Berger from Hillel. So I'm going to finish now. I want to wrap it up just a little bit. This content has everything to do, first of all, on one hand, to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, and on the other hand, to the anti-Semitism that is growing on campuses within the US and the UK and other Western universities. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm ready to answer your questions later on.
Okay, thank you very much, Dina. So I'm going to present now, I'm going to continue with some of the themes that Dina spoke to. I think somebody's microphone is on. Yep. Okay, we're getting feedback or somebody's speaking. So I'm going to continue on some of the themes that Dina spoke of about the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood on Western education. So I think we were discussing this morning, many of the scholars on this program, like our colleagues and fellow students and professors around the world, we do not know much about the Muslim Brotherhood. We are not fluent in who they are, what their ideology is. And I think there's sort of this liberal Western arrogance and ignorance that people believe if we're nice to people, they're going to change. They'll fall in line and follow what we want. Yeah, I think Haras, is it you?
Should be fine now. It was just someone on the Zoom.
Okay, sorry. We're getting strange feedback. Okay. So there is an ignorance, there's a blind spot in our education and development. I came across the Muslim Brotherhood in the late 1990s when I was living in Jerusalem during the Intifada, and stumbled into a whole area of research that I had no idea about, even though I went to very good universities and studied politics and related issues of policy at McGill, University of London, Oxford, and I never really heard about them. I kind of stumbled into it as the second Intifada was in full swing and shaheeds were in my neighborhood. So I think we have to acknowledge that we don't understand. And at the very least, as scholars of anti-Semitism or scholars in general, we need to become fluent in an ideology that is very important in certain parts of the world. We have to pay it enough respect to study it, to understand their language, their religious worldview, their political worldview, their military worldview. And if we don't engage the subject matter as scholars interested in anti-Semitism, I think we're being negligent. So I really urge you to begin to explore the importance of this element of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitisms globally. And its influence in our universities of all places. So here's a reactionary social movement that is diametrically opposed to what everybody believes on the screen. I don't know you, many of you personally, I don't know your religious views, I don't know your political views, but I'm certain that everybody on the screen as intellectuals and scholars believe in the fact that everybody should live as equal citizens under one legal system, that we need to respect people regardless of their gender, their race, their ethnicity, their language, their economic standing in society. I'm sure that despite the many differences that we have on the issues that we're discussing today and on wider issues, that I'm sure we have many differences, but I'm sure on those fundamental beliefs that all of us, I'm sure, are in agreement. And yet there's a movement that is out to destroy democratic principles such as equality and citizenship, just basic notions of citizenship. They identify Jews as the cause of the problems of the world. They are out to dismantle and destroy the state of Israel, and they call for the genocide against Jewish people. In addition to that, if that were not enough, they believe in subjugating women, murdering and killing gay people, doing away with the recognition of other religious or groups and as well as moderate Muslims, right? So they speak about Israel, they speak about Zionism, but you can look at this social movement in the last several decades, and even as we speak, as Afghanistan is falling to the Taliban, they speak about the Jews and the Zionists, but they're killing their own brothers and sisters at levels that is mind-boggling. So they're killing their own Muslim brothers and sisters, but they're speaking about the Jews. So if we're liberal progressive people and we care about the state of the world and the state of the Middle East and the state of the Islamic world, you know, I think anti-Semitism has been weaponized to be actually used predominantly so far against Muslims, if you think about it. So this ideology for the last 40 years has systematically been introduced into Western institutions and Western societies. The use of soft power, if I can use that term, has been masterfully used and executed right under our noses. And even as students of anti-Semitism, and I'll speak personally, somebody engaged in the issue, it's staggering and mind-boggling what has been going on. So as Dina said, and the headlines in the newspapers in the last few hours, we have missiles coming in from Lebanon. We have the Israeli government saying that Iran is within 10 weeks of breaking out as a nuclear weapons power, 10 weeks away. A regime that is obligated to dismantle Israel. If we have the patience and the respect to understand the ideology of the regime, we understand that they are obligated to destroy the state of Israel because they cannot tolerate the fact that a Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, a man or a woman or a gay person are equal under a system of governance. They have to recreate or create a caliphate in which Muslims and Jews and Christians and women and gay people and Yazdis and Kurds are below the Muslim, according to the Iranian revolutionary regime's view of what a true Muslim is. Yosef Qaradawi, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, we saw it yesterday, repeatedly says that the true believer must complete the work of Hitler. The true believer must complete the work of Hitler. And as I said in my opening remarks, the founding director of the Board of Trustees of the Islamic Studies Center at Oxford University was no other than Yosef Qaradawi, a man who calls for the extermination of Jews and that Muslims have to follow complete the work of Hitler. This is who's giving universities billions and billions of dollars, affecting our curriculum, affecting the atmosphere on campus, making certain people marginal, and etc. So imagine Nazi sympathizers, Hitler sympathizers who call for the extermination of a group of people are involved in your universities. Imagine in 2021, what have we learned? What have we learned, and where is the outcry? Where, you know, and we're sitting here in ignorant bliss, but now I hope more and more people will understand. So Dina spoke about Yale, so now I'm going to speak about Yale as well. In 2006, I founded the Yale Initiative for the Interdisciplinary Study of Anti-Semitism. It was the first research center at a North American university dedicated to the study of anti-Semitism. Given the legacy of anti-Semitism in Western civilization, a study in and of itself is why did it take until 2006 to create the first research center on anti-Semitism at a North American university? That's one question. So we were there from 2006 to 2011. It was a vibrant research center. We had senior research professors visiting us, Erwin Kotler, who will speak later, Bassam Tibi, one of the leading scholars of the Middle East and international relations, was a senior research fellow with us. We had a postdoctoral research program, graduate studies program. We had seminars, courses, classes. We had the largest international conference on anti-Semitism ever in 2010. We had 106 professors presenting papers over 3 days, and we had about 600 people attend. In the conference was a young student from Berkeley, California, of Syrian origin, whose uncle is the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in California, and another uncle was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United Kingdom. we believe in academic freedom and openness. So he was a law student and he came to our course and he was blogging in real time, basically saying that a racist apartheid conference was taking place at Yale. To make a long story short, the ambassador of the PLO, was the first time in the United States of America under the previous regime of President Obama, where the PLO had ambassadorship level in acknowledgement in Washington. I should also say the first act of President Obama, the first act that he ever did was ensure that a professor named Tariq Ramadan, was given a visa to enter the United States of America. Tariq Ramadan, who's now under house arrest for violently raping women, is a grandson of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood and a very capable intellectual who speaks many languages, of taking Muslim Brotherhood ideology and sort of translating it into the language of progressive, postmodern, multicultural language. So he was the first thing that President Obama did. And we know that President Obama visited Egypt as his first trip. Usually it's to Canada or to Mexico or to the United Kingdom. He went to Egypt and Turkey. And we know what he did, which was to the annoyance of the government of Egypt, is that at his initial foreign policy speech that he gave as his presidency, he, as guests of honor at the major international national event, were the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood that the Obama administration engaged. So they were his invited special guests to that lecture. I urge everybody to go, you can get it on YouTube, go listen to his speech. Go listen to his speech about engagement, about the Muslim Brotherhood, about Israel and Zionism. It's a fascinating speech, but I digress. Back to Yale. So to make a long story short, the conference was depicted by the PLO and the Muslim Brotherhood as a racist conference. We had 106 of the leading professors from around the world: Deborah Lipstadt, Robert Wistrach, Bassam Tibi. It was the who's who of the sort of international leading experts on anti-Semitism. This was the beginning of the end of our entity. So despite the fact that we were doing major work, major publications, major programming, postdoc, graduate program, etc., after 5 years at Yale University, there's a review, an academic review of all centers. And if there are issues or problems with the way the center is run, there's recommendations are made, and usually the center exists for another 5 years, and after 5 years they see if the recommendations were addressed, and this is sort of a normal process. Under extreme situation, the center could be given 2 years to rectify urgent problems. For the first time in the history of Yale University, the academic review report was deemed classified and confidential. No administrator, no faculty member, no staff member, no philanthropist has ever seen this report. It's the first and only time that this was done at Yale University, according to Alan Dershowitz and other legal scholars. So we were closed, and we knew we had enemies at Yale, but we were closed. I was given the opportunity that if I promised not to deal with the Middle East, not to deal with Iran, not to deal with the Muslim Brotherhood, but deal with the history of anti-Semitism, I would be able to stay at Yale and run the center. And the person who told me this was the person who brought me to Yale. And at that meeting, I stood up, I shook his hand, and I thanked him very much for bringing me to Yale. But I said that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I was taking a paycheck to deal with anti-Semitism from a historical perspective only, and that my colleagues and I would be banned at a university to deal with relevant issues and a relevant subject matter. So I left. And I ended up going, I was fortunate, I got to a fellowship at Stanford University, and I went to Stanford. About 14, 15 months after Yale was closed and I was sitting at Stanford, one night I finished a book late at night, and I was working very hard for weeks on this book, and I'm sure many of you have been in a situation, and I was wired, I couldn't sleep. I submitted the manuscript to my editor, and I was sitting up late at night in my little apartment in Stanford, and I was surfing the internet. I think I was reading hockey scores. I come from Montreal, I like hockey. and I was reading the sports section. And then I looked at some old emails, and I came across an email from a man named Charles Robin Hogan. Charles Hogan was the vice president of Yale University, and he was very antagonistic to what we were doing in our research center. And he, you know, we had opposition, and that's fine. That's normal at a university in politics. Anyways, I came across an old email. He was an old roommate of Rashid Khalili, the head of the PLO, the professor now at Columbia University. They were roommates at Yale when they were students. And I Googled him. I couldn't sleep, Googled him. And then I found out before he was at Yale University, he worked in a pharmaceutical company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And the pharmaceutical company was owned by a guy named Ben Mufaz. Ben Mufaz, I read, owned a pharmaceutical company in Sudan that the Clinton administration bombed because it was developing and shipping weapons to Islamists in the Middle East. So then I started reading about Ben Mufaz. The company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the pharmaceutical company, was also owned in part by none other than bin Laden himself. So I started doing research. So it turns out that Ben Mufaz actually sued Yale University Press because of an excellent book by Matthew Levitt. Matthew Levitt wrote a book on Hamas. And Ben Mufaz was trying to ban the book and trying to get Yale University Press to stop the publication of the book on Hamas. Matthew Levitt's book, worth a read. And to make a long story short, they settled out of court, Yale University Press and Ben Mufaz settled out of court. 3 months after they settled out of court, Charles Hogan leaves the pharmaceutical company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he becomes the vice president of Yale. The first thing he does is hire a woman called Aletta Wagner. Aletta Wagner worked for the State Department with a guy named Alamoudi. Alamoudi is currently in a federal prison serving 23 years of running guns and money to Hamas. Okay, so Aletta Wagner became the assistant to Charles Robin Hogan. To make a long story short, in about an hour of Googling, I discovered these things. Arab Bankers Association, foundations that were connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, money, lots of money going to Yale, to Harvard, to Cornell, to Georgetown, to Texas A&M of all places. $1 billion going to Texas A&M. And I didn't know at the time. I do social theory and the ethics of the other, Emmanuel Levinas. And now I'm discovering stuff that was terrifying me late at night in my little apartment in Palo Alto. But I didn't know what it was. Was this the tip of an iceberg, or was this me misinterpreting stuff that may have not been real or was real on the internet? To make a long story short, I spoke to some experts on security and counterterrorism. One of them is now speaking on this panel. I won't mention her name. I spoke to Dina, I spoke to other people, and they were like, yes, we know this foundation, we know this person, we know this individual, and it looks like you're finding things that are substantial. So here I was, a professor running a research center at Yale University on contemporary anti-Semitism. My colleagues and I were dealing with Iran, dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood, dealing with its influence. And then right under my nose, we were closed in part by the Muslim Brotherhood and its influence at Yale. And also liberal scholars who believe that anybody working on issues of anti-Semitism that looks at the influence of anti-Semitism in the Muslim Brotherhood, in Palestinian society, in Hamas, in Hezbollah, in Iran, then you're not scholars, right? You're advocates. You're pushing a Zionist agenda, and you're disconnected from high caliber scholarship, and you're not a scholar, but you're an advocate. Imagine. So to make a long story short, this began an odyssey that has lasted 8 years. And a small group of us, we had a total budget of 7 or 8 years of $80,000 in total. So a few $1,000s a year to help do our research. And to make a long story short, and I would like everybody to listen carefully, we discovered $3 billion in undocumented money coming from the Muslim Brotherhood to American universities. So Yale University, for example, forgot to report their funding as they're legally obligated to the Department of Education. Harvard University to this day reports its funding, its foreign funding, as one line, a total lump sum, even though they're obligated by the law to report what country it came from and individual installments and individual amounts, they refuse to do so. Texas A&M received $1 billion from the Qatari Foundation. That's the front, or that's part of the Muslim Brotherhood. So in July of 2019, I was actually running the Summer Institute at the time. I ran to Washington to present, and I presented our findings in front of the head of Homeland Security, the director of the FBI, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, and the Secretary of the Department of Education, as well as about 100 top civil servants in the federal government. And our presentation was enough to lead to a federal investigation, which was launched in October of 2019. So we were able to depict or to prove that there were $3 billion coming from the Muslim Brotherhood to the American University. And now that the federal investigation is going on, the first interim report, they've discovered $8 billion in undocumented money coming to American universities. And I believe that the next interim report will demonstrate that there's over $18 billion of Muslim Brotherhood and other foreign funding coming into American universities that is undocumented and is illegal, because universities must, according to the law, document where they're getting their money from, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, imagine the impact that all of this money is had on our curriculum, how publications are and discourse is being framed, how Georgetown University, that educates the top of our foreign diplomatic service in the United States, the influence that this is having at places like Georgetown, Cornell, Harvard, Yale, and it goes across the board. The Muslim Student Association and the Students for Justice in Palestine, which come out of the Muslim Brotherhood, are almost the shock troops. They're making life miserable for Jewish American students at American universities and Canadian universities. And they're making life difficult for our faculty to function freely. And given, this is just funding the soft power at universities, this is affecting publishing houses. During the Hamas conflict, and I'm not saying the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, I'm saying the Hamas conflict, that the Qatari Foundation funded 13 major PR firms during the time of the war. That the discourse of anti-Semitism, of contemporary anti-Semitism in our universities is becoming dominant. And imagine after the Hamas war, today there were 3 missiles fired from Lebanon into Israel. Iran is 10 weeks away from a breakout as a nuclear weapons power. What will happen after 40 years of propaganda, after 40 years of silencing people who want to work on anti-Semitism, after 40 years of propaganda that has created a profoundly contradictory red-green alliance, liberal, Western, secular, social democrats who claim to be progressive, in bed, marching on the streets, pushing the agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood as something that is normal. What will happen if Hezbollah launches rockets and Israel responds? What happens when people start to die in a war? What will happen if the West or the Israelis confront Iran that is intent and obligated ideologically to liquidate Jews and Israel, and the Israelis decide to defend themselves, and in war people will die and be displaced and be injured? The West, ladies and gentlemen, are primed for a violent outbreak of anti-Semitism. 40 years of propaganda, 40 years of soft power has led us to this point where the West, I was talking to Haras and my colleagues here in Pembroke this morning, it's almost like if you give a cigarette to somebody who never smoked, they'd probably choke and get sick. Give a cigarette to somebody who's been not smoking for 20 or 30 years and they're a reformed smoker, they'll probably take one cigarette and they'll get hooked again. Anti-Semitism runs to the core of Western Christian civilization. The children marching on the streets have parents and grandparents that believed in all sorts of tropes about the Jew. And today, this unholy alliance of contradictory hypocrisy of progressives in bed with religious reactionary fundamentalists are marching in the streets, hand in hand, some saying from the river to the sea, some calling for the extermination of Jews, some saying that the Jews are white supremacist, fascist Nazis, and the liberals are marching oblivious to who's marching along with them, saying they're not really supportive of that, but those Zionists, those policies, those Jews. So these are, as Elie Wiesel said in 2003, we're living in a time of great urgency. He corrected himself to say, no, this is not a time of great urgency. This is a time of an emergency. And from 2003 to 2021, the situation has deteriorated. So as scholars, please engage, teach your students, read. Our reports are available on our website for free. Our books are available for free. Engage. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with my analysis, but there's something going on. As scholars of society, as students of society, we need to engage and understand. And we can debate, and we can discuss, and we can disagree on all sorts of issues. But ladies and gentlemen, we need scholars, we need the intellectual leaders of our society to engage this issue and to expose the genocidal, and I'm choosing my words carefully as a scholar, literally as a scholar, to expose the genocidal anti-Semitism that is passing as something normal, the normalization of this anti-Semitism. Some are openly calling for the extermination, and you have these sheep walking behind them saying, we don't call for the extermination, but maybe the Israeli policies are not perfect, and maybe this is not perfect. But now the Jew is a white elitist, the epitome of colonialism, the epitome of apartheid. So please engage the issues. Thank you. And on that positive note, we have Haras Rafiq. Thank you.
Thank you, El-Shaddai. Thank you, Charles, for a very passionate presentation, and also for setting the scene for this part of the for this part of the session, and also for inviting me. I think this is my 5th or 6th time at the Summer Institute, and I've changed my presentation a little bit from what I was originally going to talk about, based on some of the
Haras, I think
that we had here.
The screen may not be coming through
Some of
clear.
the discussions we had here yesterday and today. So what I want to talk about now is looking at Islamism. I'm not going to talk about political Islam. I'm not going to talk about radical Islam. I'm going to use the terminology Islamism and Islamists, define the terminology, look at the relationships that they have with what we call the triple threat, look at the way that Islamists have used the model from communism to actually spread within our society, including universities, and then look at the behaviors and the pathways and how they're winning allies and friends. Give you a case study of how I remember about 10 or 11 years ago, I was in Jerusalem at the first forum for combating anti-Semitism, which is where I met Charles in the first place. And I posed the question, and the question was, is anti-Semitism becoming the default position amongst Muslims in the West under the age of 40? I didn't have any statistics, I didn't have any evidence, but that is what I thought. Now I'm sad to say that I believe that is the case. And there is a radicalization of the moderates towards anti-Semitism and even jihadism, and I'll explain some of this terminology, and then look at some, maybe just one example of ways forward. So if I can operate this, which is not working, how do I get to the next slide? Normally it's just a case of, I know how to use PowerPoint. Okay, what did you do? Oh, it didn't work. Great, thank you. So before I start, I want to talk about the triple threat. It's a phrase that we coined in my former company. I'm here wearing sort of three hats. One is Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, which is a charity that I was a co-founder of, which was set up at the end of last year. Also ISGAP, and also with about 15 years of counterterrorism and counter-extremism experience working with governments, policy, on the ground, de-radicalization, rehabilitation efforts, and working with former jihadists, one of them who used to be a commander for Osama bin Laden in the war against the Soviets, another one who spent 5 years in prison in Mubarak's torture chambers whilst he was an Islamist, etc., etc., and some of the work that we've done. But one of the phrases that we coined many, many years ago, I remember standing up, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, actually, and we talked about the triple threat. And we talked about when it comes to anti-Semitism and wider towards our civil society as well. And we talked about the far left.
Your slides are frozen.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to Zoom, so my apologies. So yeah, the triple threat, the regressive left or the far left, the far right populists, and the Islamist theocrats. And now not just Islamists, because I firmly believe that the moderates, in inverted commas, the type of Islam that I come from, which is a very traditional, classical, Sufistic type of Islam, people, individuals there en masse have become radicalized and being anti-Semitic, and I'll give examples of that. And there is a symbiotic relationship between the three. And if we use a Lord of the Rings analogy, where there's lots of rings, the one ring that binds all of these three worldviews, these ideologies, is anti-Semitism. And some people will waver between different ones. And we've seen recently in universities, especially, and some of the marches during the recent conflicts, that the far left, and even leaning more towards center left, are actually marching alongside the Muslim Brotherhood, Islamists, and other theocrats. So there is a relationship, and the triple threat is very, very important. And the money that's coming to the universities is actually feeding a lot of this symbiotic relationship. And I think my slide's frozen again. It's not moving.
We're still on the first one.
Yeah. What do I need to do?
They'll control on there.
Beg pardon?
They'll control on.
Okay, I'll just say next slide. Or shall I just?
It might just take a minute, so you can just.
Okay, fine, it's working now. Okay, so for some definitions, what is Islamism? It's not a made-up word. It's a word taken from the Muslim Brotherhood, the Arabic word Islamiyun, the word that they used to differentiate themselves from ordinary Muslims in Egypt and around the world at the time. What's the difference between Islam and Islamism? Well, in the same way there's a difference between social and socialism. Social is the way that we interact, and socialism happens to be a distinct political ideology that happens to be left of center. Islam is a religion practiced by just under 2 billion people around the world in so many different ways, often cursing the other and excommunicating the other. But Islamism is a distinct political ideology that actually wants to do three things. And by the way, people have talked about Hassan al-Banna, Rightly so, he founded the Muslim Brotherhood, and we've talked about Iran, and we talked about Sayyid Qutb being the main ideologue of the Muslim Brotherhood. A person that a lot of people forget about is Maududi, who's at the bottom right in the slide, who I call the grandfather of modern day Islamism. And he was in India, and that was an anti-colonial movement that he set up against the British at the time called Jamaat Islami. And there was a relationship and respect between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Jamaat Islami. Qutb learned many things from Maududi, and even though Maududi felt that the Ayatollah Khomeini was a deviant when it comes to the belief and the creed within Islam, because he was Shia, he sent him a letter congratulating him after the revolution, saying, well done, you have actually achieved an Islamist state. And something strange is happening, and I can't see my slides.
We're just,
Okay, maybe I'll turn around and see where I am next. So my apologies if you, okay. Okay, great.
you could just,
So-
yeah, let us know when you need to move the slides
Okay,
and we
fine,
can
fine,
move
fine.
for you.
Okay, I'll move forward. So what is it that Islamist and Islamism really need? I mentioned three things. And by the way, this is across all the different interpretations and sects within Islam. And it's too simple to say Sunni and Shia. Islam isn't just merely split up into Sunni and Shia. There are many other subsects as well. But they want three things. The first one is the desire to set up a utopian Islamist state somewhere in the world and enforce a particular version of fiqh. Remember that word for the next slide. You may have come across the terminology Sharia law. There's no such thing. And I'll explain why in the next slide. Fiqh is jurisprudence, but they want to enforce a particular version of jurisprudence and interpretation of law within Islam, usually Salafism combined with the Islamism of the different divisions, or within Hezbollah, it's slightly different in terms of the Jafri traditions. Second thing they want to do is to spread that around the world. Now imagine that. ISIS tried to do that. The first people they killed were other Muslims in Iraq and Syria who didn't adhere to their worldview, didn't adhere to this contemporary utopian Islamist state based on particular fiqh, which hadn't really been done anywhere else in the world, apart from a short period of time in Andalusia. The third thing that they want to do is wipe Israel off the map. And and both Dina and Charles have both covered why they want to do that. Some further terminology. Jihadism as opposed to, and I'll tell you why jihad doesn't mean holy war. The Arabic for holy war is Harb al-Muqaddasa. The Quran and the Hadith do not say Harb al-Muqaddasa anywhere. Jihad can mean lots of many different things, and there's a paper that I circulated to the group here for the different classifications of jihad. One of them is fighting, but jihadism is the use of or the support of force to achieve the objectives of Islamism. And of course, they believe in a theocracy, and they label all Muslims that don't believe in their worldview as non-Muslim, people like myself and people like many others. Next slide, please. So I mentioned Sharia law as opposed to fiqh. The Arabic word for law is qanun. You won't find that in the Quran, you won't find that in the Hadith anywhere. When we talk about Sharia law, in Islamic literature, in text, Sharia is a noun and not an adjective. When we say Sharia law in English, we're using law as the noun and Sharia as the adjective. So it's actually the incorrect way of using it. And Sharia means lots of different things to many, many different people. What we need to talk about is fiqh, jurisprudence. Amongst Sunnis, there are four main ones. Amongst Shia, there are two, but Al-Azhar University has recognized hundreds of different legitimate versions. There has never been, as I mentioned, apart from a short time in Andalusia, a country that has enforced one version of fiqh amongst its citizens. So that's Islamism. Islamism is the political ideology, and I think Dina mentioned this before as well. Where did they get the theology? Well, they get it from Salafism or Wahhabism. They get it from something that's come from Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab in the late 1800s. And we now see the manifestation of that as the state law in Saudi Arabia, although there are attempts to try and change that. But even within Salafism or Wahhabism, there are three types. There are the quietists, who are a bit like the Amish. They will get on, do whatever, get on, live outside of society, parallel, but won't really particularly harm anybody else. They won't like other people, but they won't harm anybody. Then we have the revolutionaries. These are sometimes the people that go and do what they call dawah and stands and stalls and on streets. And then we have the jihadists. When Islamism is actually combined with Wahhabi or Salafi theology, which means the same thing, it is the root of all, apart from Iran and Hezbollah, it is the root of every single Muslim terrorist organization you will find out there. The ideology and theology, whether it's Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, whether it's Al-Qaeda, whether it's ISIS, whoever it is, without the combination of Islamism and Salafism / Wahhabism, which mean the same thing, you wouldn't have jihadists within the Sunni traditions. And of course, I mentioned my slide. Oh,
It's working on.
it's working on there, but it's not on there. Okay, fine. I couldn't see the last section, but okay. Okay, I better talk very quickly then. Next slide, please, because this. Okay. Why is keep going? Just keeps. I'll go very fast. Okay. By the way, these slides are available if people want them, and this has been recorded. What are they trying to do and how are they trying to do it? Well, the first thing they've got to do is to persuade Muslims that the Islam that their parents believed in fits in one of four categories: bid'ah, haram, shirk, and kufar. These practices that their parents believed are not traditional classical Islam. There are practices based on a whole bunch of different things. The second thing they do is they will target the Muslim community and the wider community by setting up umbrella organizations. And can we go on to the next slide? There's a diagram. By whoever's operating the, okay, they will set up a number of umbrella organizations, different organizations in universities and various different places that will stand for different representative bodies. The right line on the side, the thick black line on the side is where they will isolate themselves from the majority. And the points up the points at the tip of the triangle is really how they will actually penetrate into universities and many other places. So you will find people in gyms, you will find people on social media, you will find people in youth clubs, you will find people in universities, you will find people all over the place. The leader of the 7/7 bombers in London was recruiting in a gym. Other people were recruiting in many, many other places. They will often use non-Islamic ways to actually get access to within the communities, and universities is a great example of that. And the third part is obviously money that is being funneled through universities and through charities to actually fund all of this. Next slide, please. This is an interesting diagram. What are they trying to achieve and how are they achieving it? Well, forget about the two. This is actually a pathways to a radicalization slide that I normally put up. On the left-hand side, you've got the different types of grievances, whether they're genuine, partial, or perceived. You've got a lens in the middle, and on the right-hand side, you've got attacks, which are theologically justified, revenge, and you've got to be in God's gang. The bit in the middle is the lens. What are they hoping to do with this money? What are they hoping to do with this recruitment? Well, they're trying to build capacity, whether it's within Muslims, but now also amongst the wider Western populations. I often say that ISIS and Al-Qaeda don't radicalize anybody. What they do is they take people that the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami, and other people have radicalized to point number 5, and then tip some of them over to 6 and 7. That's why you can have somebody. I used to work for Europol, and my former boss, Gilda Kakov, said in an open forum, so I can say it, in Prague, he was sat next to me, he said the shortest time he's seen for somebody to be radicalized to becoming violent from a non-violent situation was 2 weeks. That's very fast. I mean, they couldn't understand why at the time, but the reality is, up until point number 5, nobody's breaking the law. It's when they get to 6 and 7 is when they're breaking the law. So the first part is to actually have the other. We talked about this, people outside of the lens, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, whatever they are not part of the gang. The second is the collectivization, that everybody outside of the lens is the same. The third part is the oppression narrative, that everyone is oppressing them, especially people who are Jewish. The fourth part is that even if they're not being oppressed by certain people, by the very fact that they're not part of the gang, they're complicit. And five, the supremacism narrative. And then we get the tipping over to violence, the self-defense narrative, and violence is the only way. Next slide, please. So I'm talking very fast, but I'm available. So these slides are available. So it talks about Islamists and we talked about political Islam, etc. But I'm really sad to say that it's not just Islamists now that are anti-Semitic, that have been radicalized and calling for a holy war against Jews. And this is one particular case study. If you have this slide, you click on the link. This is, I won't put the person's name up there. You can find that out yourself by clicking on it. But this is somebody who comes from the Barelvi Sufi moderate worldview that I come from. I was involved when I was working, advising Home Secretaries and various people. I helped get him his OBE about 12, 13 years ago. He used to work for me. And he hates Salafism, he hates Islamism, he hates the Muslim Brotherhood, he hates Jamaat Islami, he hates Hezbollah. And he, up until now, has been paid by the government as an official de-radicalization expert. Listen to this very carefully. He is being paid to de-radicalize jihadists and terrorists and extremists. What did he do at the last conflict that we just saw between Hamas and Israel? Well, he started working with Islamists and supporters against Israel. He did a major speech which was captured on camera, and it was somebody at the Daily Mail put the speech up there, and I had to look at the speech myself to believe it. And he called for holy warriors against Israel. He made it into a religious obligation. He called Israeli politicians vile Jews. He prayed at the rally for many Salahuddins to reconquer Palestine. He shouted out to boycott Israeli products. However, he won't shout out to boycott Pakistan and Pakistani products, even though the way they treat the Ahmadiyas, you can't be a Pakistani citizen, a dual national, unless you sign a piece of paper that says Ahmadiyas are second-class citizens. He won't shout out BDS against China for the oppression of Uyghur Muslims. Why is he doing it for Israel? He got found out. He rang me up and said, can you help? I tried to explain to him what he was doing wrong. He wouldn't accept it. Then there was a situation where he was going to lose 90 to 95% of his income. What did he do? He rang up some people who are Jewish, begged them for help, and one person in particular did, with the view that if I help him, he will be nice to me. Well, guess what? This person and many others have been involved in interfaith for probably the last 12 to 15 years. He's an imam. Interfaith is something where I used to do it, where people sit around a table and say how wonderful we are. Then when they leave the table, start cursing each other, especially when there's a conflict. Move away from interfaith and start looking at other ways that we can actually work together. Next slide, please. And this is the final slide, and I'm sorry if I've rushed this. What can we do? Well, as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, which is a recent charity, we've recognized that opinions have become the new facts. Opinions don't care about facts. People are becoming polarized. People are becoming radicalized to extreme or various ideological positions. How have they been doing this? How has this happened? I mentioned the otherization and the lens in the middle. We live in a world where whoever tells the best story gains the support. And we, as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, did something. If you look on the left-hand side, we took an advert before we were actually formed as a charity last year, where we said, we Muslims have one word for Jews, and that's shalom, and we had lots of Muslims sign it at the bottom. During the conflicts, if you look on the right-hand side, we partnered with JLC, the Jewish Leadership Council, and we actually issued this statement in probably 90 to 95% of all of the UK major newspapers. What else have we done? Well, we've created these leaflets where guidance for people on how they can have conversations about Israel, Palestine, Gaza without being anti-Semitic. But at the end of the day, all of you, some of you are academics, some of you are scholars, some of you may be activists, but at the end of the day, unless you tell or you package whatever it is that you're packaging with the right narrative that tells the right story, you're just going to be bombarded with better stories or worse stories, in my opinion. So I will stop there, and my apologies if it's a bit rushed, but yeah, that's where we are. Oh, okay. So that's it. Yeah. Great.
Okay, so thank you, Haras. So now we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So I see Christine. Christine can ask the first question.
Haras, you said that you tried to quote reason.
Can you speak loud, please?
Yes, sorry. You mentioned the guy, the OBE guy who you knew, and you tried to get him to understand the implications of what he had just done. And you said you couldn't get through to him, or he didn't want to, at least he didn't admit that he understood anything of what you were saying. So one thing I take from that, which I don't know how to do that, if someone like yourself who really has the articulation and the knowledge and the expertise cannot get through to someone you know, right, it's pretty devastating, actually. Now, it does necessarily mean, it may mean that certainly he just wasn't willing to tell you that he understood it, he had just changed. So how do you, I mean, what could you think when you, afterwards, would you have done different if you had known that your first effort to, was not going to be successful? Where are you at in your head when you can't make headway yourself in that way?
Okay, so with this particular person, I think the fact that he knew me didn't help, because sometimes to get some form of critical thinking based around things that people have done, sometimes it's better to hear from other people. How do I know he didn't recognize and realize that he was being anti-Semitic? He told me, and I kept saying to him, "You've called for holy warriors. What's wrong with that? You've calling for BDS and you're not consistent in your values. What's wrong with that? You're calling for, you've called Israeli politicians genuinely vile Jews. What's wrong with that?" He couldn't understand it. I could have spent more time with him. I would have reversed. So I've also developed, one of the people that developed the UK channel program, which is the de-radicalization and rehabilitation program. So what I would have done is actually assigned a mentor who to deal with him and take him through this journey of bringing him back into rehabilitation through critical thinking. I just didn't have the time. The only reason he engaged in the debate, in the discussion at that moment in time, was he suddenly realized that the Home Secretary is involved, the Prime Minister is involved, is about to lose 90 to 95% of his income. But that's what I would have done. I would have signed a mentor.
Okay, thank you. Brandy, please, I see your hand is up. Please ask a question.
First, I want to say thank you.
I think you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to ask.
1 second, we don't hear you. Sorry, 1 second, please. Okay, I think we're okay now.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. How about you, Charles?
Right? No, we don't hear you.
I'll type it.
Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Okay, thank you.
I just want to know if there's been any similar type research done on funding for programs in K through 12 education, like funding coming from outside sources, and partially I'm interested in it just based on what's coming out of like the ethnic studies model curriculum and things like that out of California.
Yeah, so there's a bit of research that I know on Muslim Brotherhood funding of K through 12 education. as well as publishing houses. And it's definitely an issue. And there are groups doing research. So it's an area of concern, and it's an area of activity. Okay, so thank you for your question. Next question, Bram, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Also, great presentations, very much appreciated. I have two questions. The first for Haras. In your opinion, to what degree is the description that you've given understood by the Muslim world? How familiar is the Muslim world with the breakdown, the divisions that you're describing, and in particular that triangle, which I found I really would like to hear an hour of an explanation about that, in terms of an insight to the organizational structure that's there. And I thought it was just an excellent summary simplification it made perfect sense to me in terms of all the different things. So I'd like to know that. And for Charles, I'd like to know whether or not there is a regulatory body like the SEC that would look into reporting from the universities. And there must be some kind of reporting body in the United States. Internationally, all companies that are dealing with American businesses have to report through to the SEC and comply with things. It would strike me as being a big fundamental question is who's dropping the ball on that, or who did drop the ball on the whole issue of funding. You're raising it's now up to $18 billion. You're talking about serious money, as they say. So who's responsible for monitoring those funds, and what's being done about that?
There's a lot of questions.
Sorry?
There's a lot of questions.
So very quickly, okay. Your first answer to your first question. Where's it taken from? It's taken from the Islamists. It's taken from their own. It's taken from former senior leaders. It's taken from their documentations. It is what they believe in terms of the definition of Islamism. Jihadism is something that we've added ourselves. How familiar is the Muslim world? Well, first of all, there's no such thing as the Muslim world. There are Muslim majority countries. There are more Muslims in Indonesia than the whole of probably the Middle East combined. And they don't speak the same language, etc., and believe in a different type of Islam. There was a time when Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, all of these others were in league with the Islamists, and they were responsible for spreading this throughout the world. Three main organizations, OIC, WAMI, World Assembly of Muslim Youth, and then we have the Muslim World League, or Rabita Trust. The interesting thing that's happened now is the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and a number of other countries have recognized that for their own reasons, the Muslim Brotherhood especially, not so much Jamaat Islami, and definitely Iran and Hezbollah and their Islamist ambitions are a threat to their own security. So they are actually trying to do something about the very thing that they actually helped to propagate in the first place. So they are aware of it. But then you have the flip side, countries like Qatar and Turkey and Iran, who are on the other side, are very much housing and funding and supporting the Islamists for their own geopolitical reasons. Not necessarily because Qatar believes in Islamism, but because of their own ambitions in the region and around the world.
So very quickly, Bram, in the United States, they passed an anti-Nazi law during the Second World War that foreign entities giving money to American universities had to report it to the federal government, but the law is not being administered. So hopefully through this investigation, the federal government, the Treasury Department, and the Department of Education will implement the law that's been on the books since the Second World War. So very quickly, I see Catherine. If you have a quick question, we're going to go over 5 minutes if that's okay with everybody. So Catherine, and then yeah, go ahead.
Super quickly, Charles, can I ask you? I know that you're hoping to extend this project out to look at Europe as well in terms of the funding. Is it your sense at this stage that you're going to find very similar things to what's been seen in North Africa?
In North Africa or North America?
Sorry, North America.
All right. North Africa is another story, but yeah, we're starting to do a little bit with the UK, and I would say it's pervasive here. It's been going on for a long time. If you look at Middle East studies departments in the UK, yeah, it's blatant. So I think it's a huge issue, and it's an issue that needs to be uncovered and or not uncovered. It needs to just be, I think, documented. And I think, you know, in terms of policy, in terms of government policy, in terms of security, in terms of democratic principles, you know, the education that is being turned out of these institutes that have been funded by the Muslim Brotherhood are notorious. It started in Middle East studies, and it's spread throughout the university. So yeah, it's a serious issue. And I think if anybody's trying to understand contemporary anti-Semitism, yeah, no, if anybody's trying to understand contemporary anti-Semitism, we have to understand that the anti-Semitism of the church, the anti-Semitism of the Nazis are very important, and those types of ideas are still around. But if you want to understand how education has been hijacked and why students are being attacked on university campuses and faculty are being banned from dealing with these issues, and why, you know, the most educated people coming out of our best universities are propagating this hate, you got to look at these issues. You have to really critically examine what's been going on.
Can I just ask if modern anti-Semitism and contemporary, where does the contemporary
Okay,
start?
well, we have 2 minutes. Yeah.
So one thing, Catherine, you asked the question. So in the UK, Islamism didn't come with the Muslim Brotherhood. It came here with the Jamaat Islam in the 1970s. The East Pakistan, Bangladesh war, and a lot of the death squads came over here, and they set up a whole bunch of organizations, and even became NHS chaplains and a whole bunch of other things. Set up a number of organizations like the MCB. The Muslim Brotherhood came later, and a similar story in other parts of the world as well.
But the British are apologizing for the expulsion 800 years ago, but that's another story. Kane, the floor is yours.
My question's for Haras, and it's just a bit about when he was talking about fiqh and like Islamic jurisprudence. Obviously, Iran has its central tenet of its constitution, the Wilayat-i fiqh. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but it's the Wilayat-i fiqh. I just wondered how that differs from like mainstream Islamism that the Muslim Brotherhood is like purporting. Like how is Iran's system different?
Fiqh is jurisprudence. Fiqh is the way that an individual, whether it's a mufti or a judge, will actually take scripture from the Quran or the Hadith or other sources and say, from this I am making jurisprudence or law. So I can make fiqh for myself. I can make fiqh for my kids. I can take one of the fiqhs that's actually out there, be it Hanafi. There's different schools of jurisprudence. What the Islamists do is take a Wahhabi fiqh that doesn't recognize anybody else and tries to go back to what they claim 1400 years ago, that has to have an enemy because it was developed. The enemy was the Ottomans in the 1800s. They take that as the justification for why people will, so how suicide bombers, for example, the suicide is the biggest sin, one of the biggest sins within Islam. How is it by doing one of the biggest sins, these people will go to heaven? Well, they use the Salafi theology to justify that. But the core of why they should do it is not the fiqh or the theology, it's the political ideology, like fascism is, like communism is, and that is Islamism.
And okay, are there any more questions? Mr. Kamara, I can barely see you on my screen, yes. But the floor is yours. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know why you're not seeing me on the screen.
Okay, go. No,
I
go
hope
ahead.
The brotherhood are not disturbing you not to see me.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. I didn't hear you very. The connection is not good, so could you repeat the question?
Are you getting me?
Please ask your question.
I said, yes, the question is, the Brotherhood, Algeria has just asked Africa to stop the state that has been given to Israel, and as observer status.
You know what? I'm sorry. Can you please turn off your, sorry, excuse me. Please turn off your camera. Please turn off your camera. Please turn off your camera so we could hear you.
And
Sirajin, if possible, can you please write down your question in the chat?
Oh, no, now we can, maybe now we can hear you.
You are not getting me.
Now we hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Am I better?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Let me add a question. Okay, I said Algeria, as part of the Brotherhood, has mobilized North African countries observer status given to Israel. I think it's a repeat of 1973 Yom Kippur effect. Do we think there's anything we can do to counter them, because this is what they did in 1973 and they started doing it.
So we didn't get all of your question, but
today we know how African countries, it's not that related to university, the Brotherhood and University, but the Brotherhood and the politics of Africa. I hope you understand that.
Okay, so I didn't get all of the question, but I'll just say that in the last several years, Israel is making inroads into relations with African countries, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for both Israel and African countries to forge better relations. So I think it's an exciting time.
I would take my question.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't think we're responding exactly to your question. So I think we're out of time. I think, okay, Judith, last question for Judith. Sorry, Chris.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask Haras about, you mentioned interfaith dialogues. On the one hand, I see and understand reformed Muslims against anti-Semitism, but on the other hand, you're very, I guess, depressed by the state of interfaith dialogue. So I just want to ask you very quickly, do you see any possibility of a kind of functional interfaith dialogue that might be able to be used in order to expose the extremists and also strengthen the alliance with mainstream Muslims who do not believe in Islamist and other types of extremist ideology?
Judith, we couldn't hear you properly, but I think I understand the question from the back end about interfaith and what are there any particular types of interfaith that are more useful? If we want to tackle anti-Semitism, we've got to move away, in my view, and Dina might differ in the view, so perhaps Dina can jump in on this as well. I think we need to move away from actually having discussions about Judaism and start having discussions about people who are Jewish. Some of my friends who are Jewish are atheists. They're not, practitioners of any particular religion. And when the problem about interfaith is, what we've seen in the recent conflict, is that out of all of the people that I know in the UK that are Muslims, moderates in inverted commas, that were involved and engaged in interfaith, only about 2, maybe 3 of them, and Wasik, I'm looking for you to maybe 2 or 3 are people who didn't become anti-Semitic. However, if the discussions had been about Jewishness as opposed to religion, we can engage with people on common values, human rights, democracy, all of the things that we kind of want to accept as a default position, rather than discussing whose religion is better or not. And this is one of the problems with interfaith. And the other thing about interfaith is that a lot of Jewish organizations will work with whoever controls the microphone. And unfortunately, the Muslims that control the microphone in the UK, US, Canada, and other Western countries are the Islamists.
And I'll just say very briefly as a final note, I think the issue has to be anti-Semitism, not interfaith dialogue or Jewishness or Islam or Christianity. There's a problem of anti-Semitism being incorporated into political discourse and religious discourse. And I think we need to weed it out to understand it and get rid of it. And then maybe we can have a more productive dialogue that deals with issues of ethics and religious commonality if we get the sort of the poison out of the conversation. Dina, no, you have been silent. Is there any final remarks that you would like to say? Or
Yes, I just read Christoph's comment, and he said that he just wanted to say that fighting this whole thing has almost become impossible, as the atmosphere right now is extremely toxic. I agree, but the thing is that we can make it possible. Because the work we're doing right now and the fact that you are here and you've chosen to join ISGAP Summer School in Oxford, I think this is a very good choice. I think this is the first step, maybe the second even. Thank you so much.
thank you, Dina. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We're a little over time, so we have a 25-minute break, and then we're going to come back for another session. So thank you very much. And by the way, the